Powered by Elodic Digital Marketing Solutions.
The Couture 303 podcast with Jay Viper.
The Couture 303 podcast is now officially sponsored by Dapper Turkish Barbers in Hunts Cross. You can find them on Wood End Avenue and they do the full service there. The hair, the beard, the ears, the nose, the cutthroat, the hot towels, the lot. It's the only barbers I ever go to. Fantastic service, great lads. No need to book, just pop in and see them 7 days a week. If you want a nice sick fade like mine, you will not be disappointed. The absolute best in the area. That's Dapper Turkish Barbers, Wood End Avenue, Hunts Cross. And now back to the show. Right, guys, welcome back to a very, very special episode of the Couture 303 podcast. My guest today, let me put it this way. In different genres of music, sometimes there's labels which may or may not be the top of the mountain. In the hard house scene, there is undeniably one label which dominates. You can see it behind me. You know what it is. It's Tidy Trax. And if it wasn't for this guy who's on today, one half of the Tidy Boys, we would not be having this conversation today. Please welcome to the show, the one and only Mr. Amadeus Mozart.
Good afternoon, good evening, or good wherever. Yeah. I don't know what time it is.
Wherever and whenever you listen to this. Thanks for joining. Yeah. So, as I said off camera before, then, Amo, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Lee Haslam, actually. Did you have Lee Haslam on the other week or something?
Yes.
Yeah, he said he enjoyed it. So, yeah, I thought I'd follow suit. I didn't want to miss out.
So if it's shit, you can blame Lee.
Do that.
Right. As I do with all my guests, I'm going to go right back to the very start. So, where and when were you born?
Wow, you've got to go way back into time. When the world was in black and white, I was born 1965.
Yeah,
and I was born in a place called Kettering in Northamptonshire.
Okay. And what was your home unit like? Were you an only child? What was family unit like?
No, we were a working class family. My dad worked in the boot and shoe trade, which was very popular in Northamptonshire. That's where all the boot and shoes were made in the 60s and 70s. So he worked in a factory. My mum was back then just a housewife. And like I said, I was born in 65. And then my brother, my only other brother and sibling, was born in 1968. His name is Shane. And we were brought up very well, actually, and we had a nice little family unit, good grandparents. Yeah, I had a very happy childhood, I think, yeah.
It's nice for people to look back on with a fondness. A lot of people say, school wasn't too good and stuff like that, So what was school like for you?
School was brilliant, actually. A lot of people don't, like you said, they're a bit wary of their school days, but it was great for me, and particularly weirdly my primary school. So I lived in a place called Barton Seagrave, just outside of Kettering, from the ages of being born and 5. And then when I was 5, my first school was in Kettering, and it was the Grange Primary School, and it was really nice. It was everything you liked about school. Great teachers, great friends. I really loved it. It was, yeah. And even now, over the last 10 years, we've had school reunions. Now, most people have a school reunion with their senior school when they're about, they're older. But we've got a group of us that all get together. And the last time we met, we were like 8 years old and 9 years old, and we're still friends. So that's how good my primary school was. People like meeting up. My senior school, I suppose, yeah, it wasn't as good as my primary school, but I enjoyed it in a different way. I became the sort of the class comic, a little bit like that.
You surprised me.
Yeah, well, it was a way of a defense mechanism, because back in the 60s, 70s, there was some unruly characters at school, some bullies, as we now call them, and I think a way of keeping out of trouble and a way of keeping on the side of the good guys and the bad guys was to be that guy in the middle that made everybody laugh. So I got away with quite a lot at school. As Madness, my favourite band, said, school, when they wrote Baggy Trousers, it's all about getting through the day, and trying to bend the rules, not break the rules.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on there. I'm very similar to yourself. I grew up Again, working class background, one parent family and stuff like that. Didn't have much money. So I wasn't going to school with all like the latest gear on and the nice trackies and all that kind of stuff. So again, for myself, I wasn't an imposing kid. I was quite a slim little skinny kid. I know skinny is not what you describe me as now, like, but as a kid, I was quite slight. So I think similar to yourself, my kind of defense mechanism was, be funny. You can't fit in, you can't keep up with them with the money side of things and having all the nice bike and all that. But if you can make people laugh, it is definitely enchanting for you. So you've got a younger brother. So
yes, slightly younger, yeah.
So where would you say your musical? So what kind of music were you subjected to as a youngster? When did you first discover music and realize, well, I like this, but other than like nursery rhymes and school and stuff?
I discovered it very, very early. My dad is my total influence on music. He was an audiophile. He loved stereo, hi-fi. He had reel-to-reel tape recorders. Every new gadget that came out, we say we're working class, but any money that came in the door, he would spend on equipment and stereo and hi-fi. And I can even remember back to being like 3 years old, and my dad would buy me some 7-inch singles and put them on. And of course, when you're 3 years old, you want to hear the same track 100 million times. So very early on, and then there was one particular album that I used to love, and it was called Spotlight on the Moog, which was an electronic album. The Moog, or the Moog synthesizer, was invented in the 60s, and this album was called Spotlight on the Moog, and my dad bought it in about 1968. And what the Moog synthesizers are with its electronic sounds, it took traditional tracks like "Strangers in the Night" by Frank Sinatra, and it played them on a synthesizer in a quirky way, and it was really captivating as a child that you were hearing a track in a totally different way. And if anybody can track down Spotlight on the Moog, it's just a strange album where everything is played weirdly with electronic sounds. And this is before Kraftwerk. So this album really changed me because I just fell in love with it. And I can picture the sleeve now. And so, in fact, I've actually bought the album again. It cost me 50 quid. But yeah, that album, Spotlight on the Moog, changed me. So my dad just played music. We just this. My dad didn't like watching the telly. My mum did, and they'd often argue. My mum would come home, put the telly on. My dad would turn it off. No, let's listen to music. A weird environment, really. Like you wouldn't get today, where a family are just sitting there listening to music. And my dad, he didn't read a book or do something else. He'd sit between the two speakers and think, "Oh, is the stereo balance right? Maybe it needs more treble. I need a better amp." And he'd go out tomorrow and buy a new amplifier. So my dad, as you can probably hear in my voice, was passionate about music. And even at the age of I'd say influences from 3 to 7 years old, I knew then I love music. He bought me a record player when I got to 7, put me in my bedroom. He'd buy me records. With my pocket money, we would go to the local shop and we'd flick through records together. Yeah, my dad.
Yeah. So when did you obviously that's your passion for music has come from your father and obviously your influences. So when did it change in the sense of where you thought, okay, so this is not just a passion and a hobby now, this is something I want to actually pursue and get into, and obviously this is before the days of laptops and Ableton and even CD decks. This is tapes. I know from listening to other interviews, your early Jive Bunny stuff was literally tape to tape. You had to cut and splice the tape. This is, it's hard to imagine these days when you hear a remix and you realize, it's been made in someone's kitchen on a laptop. When you guys were doing it, it was fucking graft. You know what I mean? And you've alluded there to that Moog album. That's like the genesis of the remix. Before remixing was a thing, they'd done it and not realized what it was. So when did you realize that you were going to do actually something with it?
Well, I suppose just to precede that, jumping from being 7 to probably 14, 15, just to lead nicely onto what you've just talked about. I, at the age of 14, got into disco music, which was very unpopular when all your mates are into punk rock. So we're talking 1977. All your mates are into punk rock and new wave, being cool. And then I'm into disco. And this is where a little bit of bullying comes in. So I'm into disco when I'm 14, and I'm buying satin jackets and roller skates. And and in 1978, I fall in love with this band called the Village People, of all people,
Shut
because
up.
this is true. Because when they came out and they done YMCA, initially there wasn't an instant reaction to what they were doing, so it was just a great track. Nobody was playing YMCA as a party track. It was a good disco credible track. It became novelty later on. So I fell in love with the Village People, and I bought all their albums. They had 5 albums, and some of their album stuff's quite dark and 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 really good productions, a full orchestra. So I'm in love with disco, being bullied at school, and of course, everybody thinks I'm gay, even at 14. So this is where the bullying comes in. And I remember one guy, well, kid, he was 14, he'd pick on me and pick on me, really, quite badly. And his name was Chris Ball. And Chris would literally make my life a misery because he just played the gay card because I was into disco. And one day I thought, right, I'm going to have you. And he sat next to me in chemistry. And I'll tell you, this is how I got out of it. I said, Chris, look, stop calling me. Well, actually, I am. And I've got a bit of a crush on you. He, he went, what? And what I'd done the night before, I'd wrote Chris, and my name was Lee then. We'll talk about that. Chris for Lee. And I put it in a heart on my exercise book and showed him. He moved. He never spoke to me again. That guy kept away from me, and we never spoke. So he obviously had some insecurities himself because
Yeah.
So that disco era, that's where I really fell in love with music. Then I went a bit weird, and I went into madness, which is nothing like disco. So all these eclectic stuff got me into music, and like you said, I suppose my first experience of realizing I want to be a DJ was in 1982. My mum come home and said, oh, you're always playing music. I bought you a disco setup off a bloke at work. I said, what disco? Well, you've got 2 decks and some speakers, and you can play the music over the top of the other one. It was an old mobile disco deck. It didn't work. We got it fixed. And all of a sudden in my bedroom, I thought, this is brilliant. I can fade into one. There was a little microphone. At this stage, I'm sort of 15, 16. And I thought, this is it. And I used to play, when you're going to be a DJ, because what happened is when I played my music, I wanted other people to hear it. So I had a ghetto blaster that I used to go around the street with, and I played my music so people in the street could hear it. When I played music in my bedroom as a 15-year-old, I opened the windows. Why did I open the windows? I wanted the neighbours to hear what I was playing. So all of a sudden, I suppose all DJs are show-offs, and they want other people to hear what you're playing and into. So I knew then. So I got a mobile disco, and before you know it, a year later, I'm 17, and I'm doing mobile weddings and discos, and I absolutely love it. I'm showing off, playing chart music, but I'm a bleeding up to your tape. I don't know whether this is.
It's okay.
You want this sort of precursor to before I get my first studio equipment. I'm going to speed up the 80s because it's not too late. It's not. I'm at 1981 now, and I've got to get to 1989. But what happened is I'm a DJ. I love playing music. I do weddings. I earn a bit of money here and there. But then the conflict happens because I discover this thing called high energy, which is an expansion of disco. It's played in the gay clubs. Maybe Chris Ball was right. It's played in the gay clubs, and my mate has got a gay dad. It's Andy Pickles always said I probably should have been gay because my background is so checkered with the gay scene. But anyway, the great music came from the gay scene. So in 1984, I discover high energy, and I go to a nightclub, in this gay club in Leicester called Spots, and it's full of people in leather with moustaches, right? I've got a girlfriend by then who I'm still with now, my wife Angie, and we go with my mate just for the music. But what an experience! It blew my mind. It was dark. We're talking 1984, full of smoke, 2 green lasers that went above your head, people in leather, smelling of poppers. It was just like, this is it. This is underground music. I'm a mobile DJ playing Come On Eileen, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing this Italian Eurobeat imports and stuff, and thinking I've never heard this before. I'm looking at the DJ, and he's got his head down, and he's mixing records together, and I think this is the future I'm witnessing here. So I just fall in love with DJing, mixing, playing music that nobody knew. And so I had during the 80s this conflab, this problem of like playing at a wedding where everybody wants you to play the hits, me wanting to play underground Belgium new beat. And oh, what am I going to do? So in the end, I get a job DJing in a club in Kettering called Times. And that is where I can free my mobile DJ world and say, I can play what the fuck I want. And I can just entertain the dance floor and learn to mix records. And me and my friend, Johann Tomato Strauss, by the way, let's just
we'll get clear. On to, we'll get so you've touched on it there, so I'll mention it. So in 1986, I believe, I think it was 1986, you changed your name by deed poll to Amadeus Celery Mozart. And your friend, as you just alluded to there, changed his name again. That was for charity. So could you want to just like, we're just going to get this bit out there because it's a bit of a strange name anyway.
Let's get this out of the way, because what happened was me and my friend, whose name was Darren Kennedy, he's on this journey with me. Like I said, it was his dad who was gay who took us to the first gay club. So, and we'd been friends from school, me and Darren Kennedy, and we were both into the same stuff. We loved electronic music, Human League. So we were on the same journey, and he lived around the corner from me. And it was in 1986, while I was sort of between jobs. I worked for a charity called for Mind, which is the National Association for Mental Health, and I first worked as a volunteer, and then I got a job as a welfare assistant. So I worked for them, and they were doing a sponsored walk at the time to raise money and awareness. And me and Darren got together one day and said, "Why don't we do something to raise awareness?" And it was 1986, and we just said, "Let's change our name for a laugh." And we said, and I was going through a period of listening to classical music. It was that period in my life where I was coming home, and it was a break away from the electronic. I wanted to wind down. I was listening to classical. We both were. And his favourite composer was Johann Strauss, and my favourite composer was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So I said, let's change our names to composers. He said, brilliant. So I didn't like Wolfgang. So I said, look, I'll be Amadeus Mozart and you can be Johann Strauss. He said, but it's not, is it funny enough? And we said, let's have strange middle names. So I said, well, what could be strange? Let's have something that's got nothing to do with it. I hate celery. He hated tomatoes. He hates tomatoes. I hated celery. So I said, right, I'll be Amadeus Celery Mozart. You be Johann Tomato Strauss. We changed the name. We were over. This is how important it was. In our local paper, the Evening Telegraph, we got on the front page. Page 2 was Chernobyl. The Chernobyl. Yeah, the Chernobyl disaster was on page 2. Hell. And we were on page 1, big picture of us holding their names up, that we changed their name. So we became sort of local heroes, I suppose. Everybody knew our face because it was such a big story. We got in the Sun newspaper. We only raised £250, which wasn't a lot of money, but it was something. But more importantly, we did raise awareness for mental health. So it was a good story.
So what is your your normal regular name?
What I was born with.
Yeah.
I was born with Lee Marlowe.
Lee Marlowe.
Yeah, which is just a Darren. So we were Lee Marlowe and Darren Kennedy up to 1986, and I changed my name. Now obviously I've been with the same girl since I was 1981. So Angie, who was Angie Clark back then, we weren't married. She obviously then later she had to put up with the fact she's going to be Angie Mozart, and my son quirkily became Max Mix Mozart. And the reason he became Max Mix, because in the mid-80s, my favourite Megamix album, which in those days were like mashups, was a Spanish company called Max Mix. And they were like that's what I call music of megamixes. In Spain and Ibiza, they were legends, and they would chop and mash stuff up. They were the first to use samplers, and I was obsessed with the Max Mix album. So I called my son Max Mix Mozart, and he's still got that name today.
And that leads very nicely onto my next point. So when did celery meet the pickles? Because it's quite ironic you changed your middle name to Celery, and one of the most iconic duos in the whole of hard dance is yourself and Mr. Pickles, and obviously I know his dad was part of the team early on. So how did
Yeah.
that come about? So for those who don't know, the Music Factory Entertainment Group is the father of Jive Bunny, which is the father of Tidy Trax, essentially. So how did you get involved with the Music Factory Entertainment Group and meet the Pickles?
Okay, well, I'm on a slight delay to your question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you to that question about cutting stuff together on tape into.
Yeah.
I'm going to segue it into Jive Bunny. So it's a nice little link. So 86, yeah, DJ, gay clubs, whatever. But then as a DJ, I've become obsessed with mixing and putting one a cappella over another. So that's in me. I want to remix tracks. So we get to 1988, 89. And I'm a member of a club called Disco Mix Club, which is called DMC, which were the sort of godfathers of mixing records. They started in 1983. And what you did, you paid for a subscription. So as a DJ, I would pay £20 a month, and they would send me 2 pieces of vinyl. And on those vinyl, there would be mega mixes like I don't know, a Bon Jovi mega mix and a Luther Vandross mega mix. And there'd also be remixes on there as well. And one of the guys was called Peter Slaghouse, who later became Hit House, who did a track called Jack the Sound of the Underground. But he was my idol on DMC. I used to love Peter Slaghouse. He was from, like I said, from Holland. And I've become obsessed with DMC. But there was also that there was a rule in the UK to have a blanket license to do these mixes for DJs on the subscription. There had to be 2 companies, some sort of European law. So that's when John Pickles set up a company called Mastermix, which rivaled DMC. So they did the same thing, mega mixes and remixes, subscription only, and they were based in Rotherham. And so I joined on day one, what they set up in 86, 3 years after. So every month I'd get these 2 mixes. I was paying £40 a month for these exclusive mega mixes because, again, as a DJ, I wanted to play mixes that nobody else was playing. So that I became obsessed with that. So, but I loved the way the mixes were done, chopped up. I love Max Mix. So I thought the only way I'm going to do this myself is to find out what equipment they actually use. So I went to Holland, of all places, to meet Peter Slaghouse. And to cut a long story short, he was such a nice guy. He invited me into his studio and showed me how he'd done it with reel-to-reel tape recorders, the old reel, and how he'd got an Akai sampler and a keyboard and an Atari 1040 computer, and he would literally record all the stuff off vinyl into the Atari, into the Akai, bounce it to the reel-to-reel, and then with a razor blade and a white Chinagraph pencil, edit and cut. So if you wanted to edit something down, you had to find the beat, edit it, mark it with a pencil, pull it out, cut it with a razor blade, and stick it together. That's how you did mega mixing back in the day. So in 1989, I went out and said, right, Peter, I'm going to buy the same equipment as you. I went to the bank and said, have you heard that Jive Bunny are number one and they're doing mixes? There's a good business model for me, Mr. Bank Manager. I want to be Jive Bunny and I want to make number one records. He said, you're having a laugh. It's just a fad. And he turned me down, the bank manager from Barclays. So my wife said, I'll tell you what we do. We'll go to the Yorkshire Bank and we'll pretend we're going to buy a new kitchen. So we went and got a £7,000 loan, pretended we wanted a new kitchen, and I bought a studio. And I bought a reel-to-reel and a Atari 1040, Akai sampler, 2 Technics decks, and I had it all in my bedroom. And so I learnt my trade at home. There was no YouTube back in then. You had to read a Japanese manual to work out how it worked. And I spent a year learning how to do it. But what happened, my goal was to get my first Megamix on Mastermix, which I preferred more than DMC. So, like I said, this Jive Bunny record came out number one. I thought, 3 number ones, there's got to be a career in this. So I sent my mixes off to Music Factory, as you say, Jive Bunny in Rotherham. And a guy called Martin Smith rang me up and said, we like your mixes. We think they're good enough to go on possibly on our issue. I said, what, you mean I'm going to get something on vinyl? He said, yeah. Martin Smith, by the way, went on to be Megabass. They had some hits. But Martin Smith,
similar kind of model, didn't he, with the mega mixes?
But it was credible mega mixes. It wasn't rock and roll. It was like really underground, techno. And so Martin Smith, he lived in Hastings. We became friends, speeding up now. We became friends. He moves to Kettering with that good friends, and we really get on. And so my first mega mix on vinyl on Music Factory Master Mix was a West Bam mega mix where I took 4 or 5 West Bam tracks and mixed them together. And I did it with my then production partner, Guy Garrett, who's a studio friend. So me and Guy Garrett, we became a production partner. In fact, we became, because we wrote a track. Oh, this is. Should I talk about this?
Yeah.
We wrote a track, a rave track that sampled Rolf Harris. There, I've said it. And we wanted to not only to be on Master Mix and Music Factory, we wanted our own single out. Because once you get your thing on vinyl, okay, next, what do we want next? You have these goals, don't you? You want to achieve. We want our own single out there. So I'd got a stylophone that I'd collected, and on it was a record teaching you how to play the stylophone, which was an electronic keyboard with a pencil. Big in the 70s. And it was Rolf Harris's voice that was teaching you to play the stylophone because he endorsed it. So we made a big rave record and we sampled Rolf Harris talking to you at how to play a rave record with a stylophone. I sent it to Music Factory, John Pickles and Andy Pickles, and they loved it. And they said, we want to put this out. I thought, here we go. This is my big break. So me and Guy, we said, oh, what should we call ourselves? We hadn't got a name. So we called ourselves Two Little Boys. Weird, because Rolf Harris had a hit single with Two Little Boys. So we had this record, but they couldn't clear the original vocals. So we had to go to Rolf Harris's house. In 1991, we had to go to Rolf Harris's house with a DAT player and a microphone and get him to re-record the vocals in his house. He charged us £3,000 for an hour, and he showed us around his house. I mean, obviously at that point, he was a national hero, and we didn't know what we knew. So it was all innocent. I must clear that up. So we had this track out with Rolf Harris. It got the 71 in the charts. But the key factor is that's how I met Andy Pickles, because John Pickles, who ran Music Factory in Rotherham, invited me up to the studio because he thought these guys, Two Little Boys, Amo and Guy, they've got talent. Let's nurture them. Let's bring them up. And that's where me and Guy in Rotherham drove up one day and met Mr. Andy Pickles, who at that point was a pop star, 19 years old, 3 number ones. He wore a velvet jacket. He was a right show off. And we went in the studio and met him. I thought, I was in awe of him, really, because he was a pop star. But we went in the studio, met him, and we hit it off. Cut a long story short, me and Andy had the same sense of humour. We used to go in the studio and mess about. And John Pickles put us together, and we made mega mixes for Master Mix. He was a mega mixer, master mixer. I was a master mixer, and we became friends through that reason.
A very long answer to the question there, and you've skipped through a couple of my pointers there. So
sorry.
No, don't apologise at all. It's fantastic. So at what point, obviously, you're doing mega mixes for John with Andy. At what point do you go, okay, so I want to get this new energy sound now and develop it? And I don't think, am I right in saying hard house wasn't really a thing back then? I mean, I remember when I was DJing in the late 90s, stuff like Misha and Tim Access and Tony De Vit, I Don't Care. They in my mind were classed as techno. That's what we called, because there was no name for it. The hard house was stuff like Wamdu Project, King of My Castle, and maybe sort of some of the Clubhead stuff was classed as hard house, but there wasn't. I took a bit of a break from DJing, and when I came back, you had stuff like the Warp Brothers, and I remember the KY Jelly Babies remix of Access, and thinking, wow, this new sound is fucking amazing. It's so energetic. It's everything I liked about hardcore, but better. It's not as fast. It's not as crass. It's more intelligent. It's nicer. It's crisper. It's thicker. It's everything's better about it. So at what point? Because I don't know the background. You see, was hard house a thing and you nurtured it, or did you kind of create this? Because obviously there was the as you've alluded to, is there was the gay scene, the likes of the Tony De Vit and getting your Captain Tim Ribs and all that kind of stuff, the real hard new energy stuff, but it changed more into actually hard house. So can you give us a bit more of an insight as to how that came about and how you and Andy became started Tidy Trax and became the Tidy Boys? Don't forget, you can catch me each and every Thursday night for my show, Absolute Old School, only on In Demand Radio, where I play you 2 hours of classics and a feast of forgotten gems, usually on the harder side of the spectrum. We kick off with the early 90s every week, and then we have the trance flashback section, followed by the spotlight section. In the past, we've featured clubs and events like Kinetic, The Drome, Good Grief, labels like Tidy Trax, Bonsai and Shock, and artists such as Ultrasonic, Tony De Vit and Scott Brown. We always finish off nice and tough with the Go Hard or Go Home section. You can catch it on In Demand Radio Thursday nights from 11 p.m. or listen back absolutely free of charge on indemandradio.com or download the free In Demand Radio app for Apple or Android.
Yeah, well, I can answer that. I'll try and answer it as quick as I can because I know that I do rabbit on, but I have to, again, jump 2 spaces back to go 3 spaces forward. So, yes, hard house, where it comes from. Let's go back to 1984. I saw Tony De Vit in a club called the Dome in Birmingham in 1985, I think it was actually. And the night was called Bolts. It was a gay night. Tony was playing. It was a Monday night residency. Tony was playing. And I never forget when I walked in, I was blown away with Tony De Vit because not only was he a fantastic mixer and DJ, he brought a little keyboard, plugged it in, and when he played Madonna, Open Your Heart, he was playing the chords over the top of it. And I thought, this guy is a genius. So I sort of followed Tony De Vit in the 80s through the gay club, through the gay scene. Like I said, I was DJing in gay clubs. Andy Farley was DJing in gay clubs. Of course, Tony and E&M. We all had the same journey. Only difference was I was the only straight one amongst them. But yeah, we were all on the same journey. So high energy became high energy in Eurobeat. Eurobeat became what was called in the late 80s, early 90s. Well, first of all, I remember being at the Dome and Tony playing, and I was listening to high energy in Eurobeat, which was all about songs. Like, I suppose the nearest thing you could probably relate to it is like the Stock Aitken Waterman stuff. It was songs. But then all of a sudden, there was this new thing coming in that Tony dropped in. And I'll never forget it. We're at the Dome, 2,000 people on a Monday night, listening to high energy. And there was this track that he kept bringing in. It went, Jack, 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 Jackie Barney, Jack, Jack. And it was like house music, 1985, 1986. The gay scene brought in this house music, which was minimal. It was just one sample, and it was being mixed with high energy. But what they had to do, because high energy was 128 BPM, and early house music was about 116 to 120, they had to play it fast. So you'd got the energy of early Chicago house mixed with high energy. And that became, then you've got acid house, then you've got what we call rave and the prodigy, and then you sort of mash it all up with what's happening in Europe. And then we had an album out in 1992 called Hit the Decks. And this was the follow-on to Megabass. And we had the challenge of mixing it. And I was playing this stuff. This album, it had the prodigy, actually, the management rang us up and said, we've got a track called Charlie Says. It's coming out in about 6 weeks' time. We want it on your album because we've heard it's going to be TV advertised. And we said, okay, send it. They sent it to us. We loved it. And we said, right, we're going to put it on the album. It wasn't released yet. This album that we put out called Hit the Decks, TV advertised. So you're watching Coronation Street and then all of a sudden there'd be an advert. And it was like no other album you'd ever heard. It was like 148 banging hard music with the prodigy on that hadn't had a hit record yet. So we broke the prodigy through that record. And Carl Cox mixed one of the albums. So we were sort of in 92, 93 playing this very hard, aggressive, energetic, fast music. Now, there wasn't a name for it because we were all playing. It was a fusion of different sounds. No one person invented hard house. But in 1995, we'd set up Tidy Trax. And in 1996, we had to go to a thing in France called Medum, which is an exhibition where all record labels come together in the south of France and they show off their music to license it. And I remember me and Andy sitting in the office saying, what are we going to call our music? And I said, I don't know. And Paul James was there, another producer, and we sat and we said, well, it's hard. It's sort of house music, but harder. And we said, well, let's call it hard house. So okay, we'll have a strapline, Tidy Trax for the finest UK hard house. That was our strapline, 1995. And we used that on all our literature and promotion. And that, as far as I'm aware, commercially, nobody had ever put anything. They might have said it under their breath or in conversation in an after party, but nobody had used the term hard house before Tidy Trax. So we came up with that name, so much so that it became synonymous with our record label. That when Nucleus came along, they didn't want to use it because we'd already used it. So they came up with the term, we can't use hard house. Tidy are using that. We'll call it hard dance. So Nucleus came up with the term hard dance to counteract us using the word hard house. So we had some individuality between the two labels.
Yeah.
So that's how the names came about. No one person invented the sound. It's a mixture of everything you've heard before on top of everything. Baby Doc once told me because he, for me, was a great influence of Baby Doc was a big influence of Tony De Vit. So when you hear Tony De Vit's music, if we always say Tony De Vit was an influence on us, Tony was inspired by what Baby Doc was doing. And Baby Doc was inspired by somebody else. So all of a sudden you go back and back and back. But Baby Doc said, oh yeah, when I'm producing a track, I take 9 kick drums from different tracks and make one kick drum. And so he had the loudest kick drum in Europe. And Tony De Vit used to go back to his studio and say to his engineer, Simon Parks, I want a kick drum louder than Baby Doc's. So, and I tell you what, I want it faster. And Tony actually made Are You All Ready purely because he wanted a track to piss everybody else off at the end of the night. So when he always used to play last because he was the fastest DJ. And he wanted one track to make everybody go, what the hell's happening? So he made Are You All Ready at 150 BPM so that it could be harder and faster than anybody else. It was a novelty track. And yet people speak to me today about the Hoovers and the horns and everything from Hard House and say, oh yeah, it's got a Hoover in it. I said, Tony didn't want Hoovers all in tracks. He only made one track with a big Hoover in it, and that was because he wanted it as the fastest track and hardest track. So don't assume that we all sat there and everything had to be a Hoover in it. It was Tony's fault for making Are You All Ready?
I tell you what, though, Are You All Ready? And I don't care. I've got a radio show. I do a weekly radio show on In Demand. And every week, or most weeks, we have a spotlight. I've had a spotlight on Tidy Trax. I've had a spotlight on this and that. And I did one on Tony De Vit. And it was coincided with the anniversary of his death, and his sister just started talking about this documentary. It was really strange how it happened. I put this show out randomly saying, spotlight this week on the legendary Tony De Vit. And his sister seen it and got in touch, Jane, and
brilliant.
It was brilliant. But yeah, Are You All Ready? And I Don't Care, still to this day. And I say it every time I play them on the radio show, I say it every week. Fucking phenomenal tunes, absolutely mind-blowing. And you touched on the Baby Doc thing there. I had an album of yours many moons ago, and that was in back in the day. You got a CD with a booklet, and part of the booklet it was Baby Doc saying. I remember reading that Baby Doc saying, "Oh, why just lay loads of kick drums together to make a kick drum?" And one of the things you touched on there about before hard house was a term, you'll probably know better than me. Hard bag. People would call something a hard bag mix.
Can I tell you that's the reason? One of the reasons we came up with hard house. We hated the term hard bag because we were going to trade, and let's just touch on trade at the moment because that is a very, very. We talk about Sunday Central and Tidy events being so big, but without trade, I don't know. There may not have been a Tidy Trax because when we set Tidy Trax up, we wanted to be a record label that was played at trade. Me and Andy again. Going to gay clubs. I can't get away from this, but from 93 to about 98, the record industry used to go to London because trade, if you didn't know, and people who don't know, it used to start at 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning and go through till midday Sunday. It was an after-hours club, probably the first, biggest, best-known after-hours club of all time. And in London, it was in Clerkenwell Road. And it was at a place called not the Gallery, Turnmills, and it was such a place. When I first went to trade, I remember going down the stairs, and me and Andy went together. We were lightweights. We didn't go to an after party. We didn't follow through from a party and go at 4 o'clock in the morning. We'd go to bed, set our alarm, and drive down and get there for 7. We'd always get there for Steve Thomas's set. But I remember going down those stairs, and this was about 95, and I don't know, the atmosphere. For the first time ever, I felt a club go through my chest. It was a mixture of the bass, the smell, the smoke, the lasers, the atmosphere, what was being played. I remember it took my breath away. It was like like that. That's how good the atmosphere was at Trade at its peak. And you got E&M and Tony De Vit and Steve Thomas and Pete Wardman, and those are the magic days when it went from 4 o'clock. You got Alan Thompson playing like New York Garage. Malcolm Duffy speeding it up to Steve Thomas. Steve Thomas was an unbelievable DJ, and then that's when Tony used to come on about 9 o'clock in the morning. When he came on, the place went mad. I remember Andy saying, "I'm a bit unsure." He hadn't gone to gay clubs before. I said, "I'm a bit unsure going down there." I said, "You'll be all right. You'll be all right." Tony De Vit came on, second track in. Pickles, he's got his top off, and he's got this bloody glow stick round his neck like that, and he got all these men around. I said, "You were unsure. You had your top off within 10 minutes. You know, all these people around." So we lost the plot down there. But the good thing about going to Trade was you were there. Next to you were Red Jerry. Behind you was Baby Doc. There was John the Dentist over there. The music industry was there because, as a record label and a producer, what's Tony playing? What's Ian playing? You wanted to know what they're playing because what they were playing were going to be big hits, or they were acetates and brand new stuff. So it won't be, I'm sure you're going to ask the question, why did you set Tidy up? It was probably because of Trade, Tony De Vit, and that era. But Hardbag, shit. Hardbag, shit. Shit name. Whoever came up with that really needs, a good sorting out. It was, and that's why we came up with Hard House. We hated the term Hardbag.
I think it's an organic thing. And I remember in the late 90s when Billy Daniel Bunter and Sharky and DJ Energy, as he was back then, Kev Energy, came up with this sound, and it was like hardcore mixed with trance, and it was getting called trancecore at one point. And then I think it was Sharky and Energy said, no, we want to call it freeform music without boundaries. That would have forever been called trancecore, just like Hard House would have been called Hardbag. So
look, it frustrates me, Jay, to be honest. The terminology, we have to, I don't know, there's something in us, we have to pigeonhole what we're into, because probably in a pub, when people say what you're into, you've probably got to, I like, and you've got to say something. The worst one for me, and it's controversial, is techno, because I've got albums in there from 1986 that have got the word techno on it. It's nothing like techno what we know now, and I've got albums from 1991 that's got techno on it. It's nothing like techno we've got now. This is my theory. Techno just latches onto anything that's popular, and they shove the name at the end. Basically, anything that they don't know what it is, they say techno. It literally, the reason techno's lasted so long is because there's been 150 different versions of one thing, and now they call it techno. What I hear today, and people call it techno, I said, that's techno. Yeah, that's techno. All right. So, and it's like you've got progressive techno. I think there's this new one called hyper techno they've just invented. All they're doing is let's just put techno on to be popular. Think of a name, hyper, that's fast. Now we're going to make it more popular. Hyper what? Hyper. Let's call it hyper techno. Kids will love it. And that's my theory. Shove techno on the end of anything, you've got a genre. Beatport love it.
You're probably right, because there was hardcore techno, there was jungle techno, sci techno, techno trance. It's you're probably right. So when you first was it an idea for an outlet for music for Tidy Trax, or was it more you were changing direction from the? I mean, you touched on the album there that hit the decks. I had that, and if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong here. Didn't that have a sample of Rolf Harris in that, or there was samples of something?
Well, it did. Yeah,
I remember it. I had it on tape.
Yeah, it did. The reason being, we were still going, me and Guy Garrett were under the name of the Two Little Boys as a production team, DJ team. So that album was Battle of the DJs, and it was Mega Bass versus Two Little Boys. That was our DJ name. So the reason when we went to Rolf Harris's house, we got him to say loads of other stuff while we were there, and we used the samples in the album. I even got Rolf Harris to do me an answering machine message from my phone, which obviously it's not on now. But
change
so
it back
yeah,
to Gary Glitter.
yeah, back to Gary Glitter. Yeah. So you're right. Hit the Decks did have Rolf Harris samples in, and we get to Tidy Trax is me and Andy become good friends, but also studio partners, and we start to make music together. And we were in the studio one day messing about, and Andy played the chords for U2 New Year's Day. I think it's the only thing he could play, and he kept playing them and playing them. And I was going through the record library, and I got Alison Williams' Sleep Talk. The intro to that's got an a cappella, and I threw it over the top of him playing New Year's Day, and we had a hit record with Hyperlogic, Only Me, which was signed to London Records, which was an offshoot of London Records called Systematic. Wigfield was on Systematic. So we got this big record that was signed to London called Only Me, and yeah, we got a deal with London, and we got other major record labels introduced. We could have been a big thing, but what was frustrating is they took ages to do it. We had to do 16 different versions. Oh, can you tweak that? Can you tweak that? And we were not in control of our own destiny. It was almost like another record label was making our music. So we got frustrated. John Pickles came into the room one day when he said, "Look, lads, why don't you make your own music for your own label? You know, we've got the Jive Bunny success. We've got the finances to set it up. Why don't you set your own label up? Call it what you want." So in the summer of '95, went away on holiday, and he said, "Think of a name while we're on my way of a record label." And I had a meeting in London with Martin Smith, and we were coming back on the train. And I said, "Martin, I said, I've got to think of a name for this new label." And I was drinking a can of Tango Orange, and on the back was a little "Keep It Tidy," Keep Britain Tidy logo. And I said, we were big fans of Huge Tunes at the time, by the way. Fucking great label. But what they did is they used a stickman on all their releases. And I thought, I want something iconic like that. And I thought, do you know what? And little did I know, in 1987, I worked for Keep Kettering Tidy. That's another story. I worked for Keep Kettering Tidy, which was a job which was just for the council. But that must have been in my subconscious. So I looked at this logo and I thought, oh, I'd love to use that. And Martin said, why don't we adapt it? We turned the bin with a bit of paper, we redrew it, turned the bin upside down, and put the man holding a record on the deck. We had the logo. I said, that's it. Tidy Tunes. We'll be called Tidy Tunes. By the time we got back to Kettering, we changed it to Tidy Trax. I looked online and found out that you can use that logo because it was public domain, which means anybody who got a product was allowed to use the Keep Britain Tidy logo. So I thought, right, we're not going to get done for it. We're legally bound to use it. So that was it. We had Tidy Trax. And the first release came out in September of 1995, which was a little demo that I'd done with Andy that sampled Depeche Mode and the Jets' Crush on You. And it was by the Handbaggers. And that was our way of sort of like taking the piss out of Hardbag. We thought it was a little bit of a dig at the Handbaggers. So we came up with this camp name, and we got this track called You Found Out. And we put it out in September 1995. And that was the birth of Tidy Trax. And because Music Factory had a lot of money at those days, they were still doing well with Jive Bunny, sold 15 million records. They said, do a video. And we had this conflict because me and Andy wanted the label to be underground, and we put white labels out with our phone number on. We wanted it to make it look like it came out of a kid's bedroom, not a corporate company behind it. So we made it, we played everything down. We made the bag look like it was crumpled paper. But anyway, we had a video made with two girls miming to it. We tried to sign it to Amato and distribution. Nobody wanted it. It was a bit of a flop. We only did 2,000 copies. But we re-released it on the fourth Tidy release, and we got Tony De Vit to remix it, and it came out as the first and the fourth release on Tidy. And I suppose it sort of blew up from there. Really, us going to trade, listening to the sounds of trade, we were making records. We wanted to make records that E&M and Tony De Vit would play out. Eventually, we got there. The biggest turning point was Signum, What You Got For Me, which we signed from Holland. And little did we know when we signed it, it hadn't been released. It became Tony De Vit's favourite record, I think, not of all time, but before he passed away, that was the record that he was in love with, Signum, What You Got For Me.
Yeah.
And The Dawn was actually inspired. The Dawn, when he wrote The Dawn, he had Signum on the decks and he just played it and played it.
So I was privileged enough to see one of the videos you put out, which we'll touch on a little bit later, the Tidy Pro. And it was a track deconstruction of Signum, What You Got For Me. And it was crazy to watch. Like, you listen to such an iconic track like that, and it was about 7 sounds. I couldn't believe it. When he was breaking it down, and he'd had a layer, and I was like, "Fuck me!" It's so raw and so basic, but so fucking, in today's society where everything's layered. You've got 20 different synths, and as you've alluded to there, Baby Doc's used 9 different fucking kick drums. Back in the day, if you had an 8-track recorder, you couldn't even do a Baby Doc kick, never mind anything else. And it was just the simplicity of What You Got For Me. It blew me away. So you've mentioned them once or twice now. I'd like to, if you don't mind, just delve into your relationship with the late great Tony De Vit, how that developed and how it ultimately ended up.
Yeah, we're at that point. I keep mentioning his name. Of course, I have to because, like I said, I followed him from '84 right through for him being a DJ in gay clubs. I saw him go from to nothing to hero, really, and he was such a talented DJ. Always DJ with a smile on his head. I mean, people sometimes take the piss out of me and Andy saying we're a bit stupid and light-hearted considering the music's serious. But Tony, although his music was fierce. He was a fun guy and he always had a smile on his face, brilliant mixer. So I followed his career. We wanted Tony to play our stuff in '95. We had a magazine called Mixology, which Music Factory owned, which was like a mix mag, and it was an industry magazine. And it was good, really, because we could get that in the hands of the industry. We had charts in there. We could do interviews. And I was probably one of the last people to interview Tony in his studio in Birmingham at the Custard Factory, because me and Martin Smith, we wanted to it was I'm not saying a way to get to really know Tony better, but it was a good way of me, because I'd followed his career. We never had chance to chat, because you as a clubber, you see him DJ, you say hello and everything, but you never get that intimate chat. So this was a perfect time for me to go to Tony's studio with Simon Parks, with Martin, and be in his studio. And there's a video online on YouTube where he's showing us all his equipment in that time, and that's me and Martin filming him. And I said to him at the time, at the end, Tony, we want you to remix one of our tracks for Tidy Trax. We'd love you to do our first single. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So that was a connection there. A long connection where we hadn't spoken, but a connection where a bond formed there. And then he remixed the track for us. And then what happened is, sadly, he fell out with his engineer Simon, and there was a bit of a to do, and the studio broke down, and it was a bit of a sad time for Tony. But what happened is he liked us. He liked what Tidy Trax was doing. He'd already started playing like funky groove and got into what we were doing. And when his engineer, like he'd fallen out with him, he needed a new engineer, and he loved what we were doing. So we hooked him up with Paul James. We said, look, we want to do a trade EP. So we'd done a deal with Trade, and we said, why don't we do an EP of all the big Trade DJs? They do a track, and we'll put it out through Tidy. They love the idea, and Tony said, this is a great time for me to have a new engineer and do a new sound that I love. This will be the start of something big. So he came up to Rotherham Studios. We put him in the studio with Paul James. We were in the studio next door working on a new Hamburgers track. And we all went out for something to eat. And he came up to me after we'd been out and said, oh, can I take you to one side, Ammo? And I said, yeah. And he said, I have something to tell you. I love working at Tidy. This is reinvigorated me. But the sad thing is, I've been diagnosed with HIV, and I don't want to tell I want, if you tell the others, because when I tell people, it upsets me if I tell a group of people, can you tell the team that, it's not all rosy in my life at the minute. It's because back in 96, 97, having HIV and AIDS was a death sentence more than it is now. And so, it was really sad when he broke the news to us. And he said, "Look, I'm over all the crying. I'm positive. I'm gonna get better. And I want this track that I'm working on with Paul. I want it to be called The Dawn, because for me, this is my new era, new producer, new label. We're going to do great things together." The Dawn was finished, I think, in the March, and by the time we got the trade EP out, Tony passed away and died. It was E&M that rang me up at the train station and told me that he'd passed away. And we had this real dilemma because we'd just done this track with Tony that was about a month away from being released, and he passed away. So what could we do? And I remember speaking to Jane and the family, and I always remember Tony saying to me in a previous conversation, "I make music because I want the whole fucking world to hear it." And he was talking to me about commercialization. If I do a track and it's cheesy, I don't care. I want the world to hear. And I remember him saying that. And I said to Jane, he would have wanted us to put this out without a doubt. He would love us to put this out. And I don't want to ride on the back of someone's death. And we've got to be very careful here. But Jane said, "Let's do it." So we put the trade EP out, and The Dawn came out. I think it was about 5 weeks after he passed away. And it was a sad ending because he was on the front cover of magazines. He wasn't an overnight success. He'd spent 20, 30 years becoming a superstar and got there and sadly passed away. And it was because he was such a nice guy, I believe he passed away, because he should have, doctor's orders, took it easy, but he couldn't say no to a gig. He got a gig in South Africa. He shouldn't have gone. And when he came back from South Africa, that's when he fell ill. He was a workaholic. He didn't like saying no. He loved DJing. So for him to conform and lock his way in a bedroom to be safe, he couldn't do it. He was such a nice guy, and it was such a sad end. But he became a cult status, and we said at Tidy, after he passed away, to Jane and the family, we would do everything we can to keep his name alive.
And you've done just that. I mean, obviously, I first discovered I wasn't privileged to go to them clubs and go to train and stuff like that. But I first discovered Tony De Vit through the music he'd made and some of his remixes. I remember he had a remix of Taylor Dane, "Tell It to My Heart." I remember thinking, fucking hell, this, like, there was a pop song, but this remix of it was like, fucking hell, it's really good, this. And obviously he remixed other stuff, but it was I Don't Care and Are You Already, which first got it. I had them on white label. They came out on Jump Wax, but I had them on white label as well. And that was when I first discovered Tony. And as you've alluded to there, it's a tough situation to be in. You don't want to come across like you grave snatching or whatever you want to call it. But you as an organisation, you've done a fantastic job of keeping Tony's name alive, keeping him very relevant, educating the younger people who've come along. And it's quite ironic that he called it Track the Dawn, and ultimately it was his final track. The story you told me there, it kind of reminds me. I remember seeing a documentary about Freddie Mercury, and I think it was "I'm Going Slightly Mad" was his last song, and he was physically fucking, he was really bad. I remember Brian May saying, we just wanted him to rest, and he was like, "Listen, this could be the last track I ever record." And I always remember it got me really emotional at the time. Probably would have watched it again now. And at the very end of the video, he looks at the camera and he goes, "I'll always love you." Because he knew. It's a lovely moment. It really is. I feel my eyes stinging now thinking about it. Because he knew that was it. That was the very end of his life, and he wanted to get that one last thing out there. Like Tony. Maybe it's a gay thing. Who knows? Maybe being happy is being called gay for a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe
exactly.
that's just the satisfier of it. So moving slightly forward, then. Obviously, Tidy Trax is doing fantastic. At what point do you think, what we should do here? We should hire Pontins and Prestatyn and put a fucking big 3-day rave on with all our DJs and all our music and sell all our merchandise. How the fuck did that monstrous idea become? Because let's be honest, it was massive, and then it kind of dipped down, and then it was nearly dead, and then you've resuscitated it, and it's back again. So let's have a little chat now about the Tidy Weekenders.
Once again, throughout this little chat, I always go 2 steps back to move forward. But yeah, the weekend is starting in 2002. But it happened organically. What happened is we were doing the Tidy Trax, and the label was doing okay. We'd had some big releases with Signum. Me and Andy were locked away in the studio. When we set Tidy Trax up, there was only about 5 or 6 producers. Me, Andy, Paul Janes. We'd done the Tidy Girls EP. We'd produced all this stuff locked away in the studio, not realizing what was going on out there. And it was only when we went out to a few clubs like Sunday Central did we realize they're wearing Tidy t-shirts. We haven't got any Tidy t-shirts. They were making their own.
Yeah.
So we thought, this must be a bit of a cult, this label. We've been locked away in Blinken. So when we got to our fifth birthday in 2000, to celebrate our 5th birthday, we said, let's put a party on. And I remember Richard Scaife, who was working for us at the time, said, let's do it. He got this club in Wolverhampton, Mezzanine it was. And he said, let's see how it goes. We'll put some tickets online. 48 hours later, we'd sold 2,000 tickets. This is like before, Skiddle and the internet. I think we put it on a few message boards. We're having a party, and you had to ring up for a ticket. 2,000 tickets. 2,000 people turned up for our 5th birthday party. That was in the September of 2000. And then we said, it was a headache, to be honest, because we'd never done events before. And I remember Randy Pickle saying, fucking hell, it's good, but I'm never doing that
Never again.
But when he got back, he looked at the spreadsheet and said, oh, quite a lot of money. Let's do a Christmas party. So we went back to the Mezzanine and done another one, and 2,000 people turned up again. And at this point, Richard Scaife, who joined us, he was from a tech company called U-Boot, which was one of the first people to sort of push the text message game from Germany. And he'd just left his job. He said, I'd like to join you. And because your events are so big, I'd like to do an event strategy for you. And we said, all right, yeah, I like that. We need somebody to take care of the events. So the first thing we did was a Tidy Vision tour, whereby we'd done this little video whereby it was all clubbers going mad and dancing to Tidy Trax. And we used to put the visuals up in clubs and Sunday Central. So he said, I'll do a Tidy Vision tour. And we said, okay, let's go into different clubs, putting the visuals up, and we'll push the brand. And he said, oh, have you ever thought about doing something at a campsite? We said, no. He said, oh, I've got a mate at Pontins. He went away, had a meeting. He said, come back. He said to Andy, we can do this. We need anything between 2,000 and 3,000 people to come to a campsite for 3 days and 3 nights at Pontins. And I said, but Pontins is that a bit of a shithole, isn't it? He said, yeah, let's go and have a look at it. And I went and had a look at it in Prestatyn. And I remember on the buses from 1973, they'd filmed the whole holiday on the buses at Prestatyn, Pontins. And I was familiar with the film. I said, this hasn't changed since 1973. It's the fucking same. And he said, yeah. But I looked at the main arena and he told me the theory. But he said, just imagine all these clubbers getting off their head for 3 days. I thought, they'd love this. They'd fucking love it. So we did it. And then the first one we did, we had about 2,000 people. And I came back from that event and I come home on the Monday, bit jaded, and I sat in my studio and I wept. I hadn't cried since my dad had passed away 6 years earlier, 7 years. And I literally wept and I didn't know why I wept. And it was all the emotion of all those people having such a good time for 3 days and 3 nights. And it wasn't about the DJ, the lasers and the clubbing. It was about the community. And I realised we'd got a really, really unique, strong community. I'd seen clubbing brands before, record labels, but I thought, this is unique. There's nothing like it. People were showing me tattoos and they were obsessed with the label. And I thought, we're a bit of a cult. So this event became special. We put the next one on, 2,500 people. We put the next one on, 3,000 people. By the time we got to Tidy Weekend of 5, which was your first one, 3,600 people. And so much so that the VIP tickets would sell out for Tidy Weekend of 5 in 45 seconds.
I remember walking in to the main arena. I think I told this story on either Paul Maddox or Lee Haslam's podcast. I can't remember. We turned up Tidy Weekend of 5. Didn't really know what to expect. It was an army theme, I believe. It was our
first theme, yeah.
Army theme. I remember just looking around and all these friendly faces, and obviously, people are doing what they're doing and, having fun. And I remember walking into the, obviously I'd been to Pontins myself when I was a kid, but my mum took me there. I remember a little fucking green gonk, I was fucking made up with it. And I went to this, I remember walking, you walk past the Londis or the Spa or whatever it was. I can hear the music and I can see everyone walking around these fluffy boots and stuff. And we weren't really like cyber ravers. We were just went clubbing and stuff. So we weren't all dressed up like they were. I remember walking into the main arena. I believe 20,000 hardcore members had just come out. And on your Tidy TV thing, that was one of the promos with Yoji and stuff like that. I always remember walking into that main arena and like yourself, actually getting emotional. I remember walking in like it was the biggest thing I'd ever been to. I'd only been to like clubs, you know, the clubs that hold maybe 1,500 people or something like that at a top max. I remember walking into the main arena, Tidy Weekend of 5, looking round. I think we must have got there about 8 or 9 o'clock and it was full. I remember being like a little bit like overwhelmed, like what the fuck is this? Like it's similar to when you first went to trade. I'd never seen or felt anything like it. And as you said, it wasn't just the music. It wasn't just the production and the lights and the lasers. It was the atmosphere and the sense of camaraderie and this being a part of this massive fucking family, basically. And you're looking around and everyone's looking. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And they kept going and going and going. I think I went to about, I'm going to say 7 because they changed name. I remember going to an Ideal one. And
yeah, they stopped. We went up to. We didn't do a Tidy Weekend of 13. We skipped and went to a 14, and we did a 15. And we didn't do a 16. It turned into the Atomic Weekenders.
That's right, Atomic,
because, yeah. There was a bit of a dispute between. There was a bit of. I'm not saying a falling out, but we had the production company and music factory. There was a bit of a lean period where we did the Atomic Weekenders. But then we brought the Weekenders back for the Tidy Weekender reunion in 2011,
yeah.
And then we had the Ideal Weekenders for about 3 or 4 years, and then we brought the Tidy Weekender back in 2000 and what it would have been 2014, 15, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've come and gone, but they've always been there. We always used to say this is the last one. We've been renowned for saying that, but it's the wrong message. Because they were off their face, they kept mishearing us. We always said, treat this like it's the last one, because one day it will be the last one. Yeah. And we've always had that ethos. You know, when you're going out clubbing or whatever you're doing in life, life's too short. We've lost lots of friends and I've lost lots of relatives. And I lost my dad at a very young age of 55. And I've always had this feeling of living for the moment. And so they misunderstood us when we said, look, this could be the last one. And it also... We got to a point where we were doing 4 weekenders a year, you know, at the peak in 2004. We'd have one in March, one in October, a summer camp weekender in Canberra Sands, and we had one in Blackpool, a New Year's Eve weekend. So we'd have 4. But we didn't know we could do the next weekender until we finished that one, because the one thing about a weekender is, with everybody partying, it's a dangerous situation as an event company. If there's a tragedy, there is no more weekenders. And we nearly did have that at Tidy Weekend of 5 between me and you. Before we went on stage on the Friday night, the place was nearly shut down because we had a casualty that was took in an ambulance that could and very nearly died. Wow. So at Tidy Weekend of 5, we were in the back room, and literally it was a room this size. There was 5 of us, and me, Andy, and the team. This guy had gone under. He took to an ambulance, and the ambulance people said, we think he's dead. We've got to take him to the hospital. This was literally an hour before me and Andy went on at Tidy Weekend of 5. 3,600 people outside partying. We're in this cold room, and somebody gave us a phone number of his mum ready to we were waiting for a phone call from the hospital to see if he was dead. And the next phone call would have been his mum to tell him he was dead.
Wow. And obviously he didn't die. Did he ever come back?
Well, we don't know whether he came back. He didn't die. They brought him round. He'd gone under, but they revived him, and he didn't die. And the party went on. Now that, weirdly, out of all these years, you would have thought, bloody hell, you've done these for like 23 years. You've surely got more casualty stories than that. No, that was
Yeah.
the nearest and the most dangerous
Yeah.
moment, and it was just a one-off. But thankfully, it's never happened again. But I'll never forget at Tidy Weekend of Five, while you was having the time of your life in that main arena, we were sitting there dreading the fact that we could have
Wow.
been shut down, and there would have been no more after that.
Of course,
We've
yeah.
got, yeah. So that's why when we are on the stage saying this is the last one, it always could be because we can't book the next one until we got the all clear on the one we're on.
I was actually at Garland's, another gay club, where you and Andy were playing, and a girl took medically ill, shall we say, and you stopped the set, and rightfully so. I remember it very well. I think you were on last, and this girl collapsed, and you went, "No, we're stopping. We can't carry on." Dancing around behind the decks while this girl potentially could be fucking dying on the floor. I remember at the
Yeah,
time you got a little bit of flack from some of the people, like maybe you were being like a bit of a diva, but again, they're not thinking of the bigger picture. If that was your fucking daughter lying on the floor dying and some dickhead still dancing around behind the decks, you wouldn't be happy about it, would you? And I think you definitely took the moral high ground there, and took a risk because people don't want the party to stop. But you're right in what you did. This girl was on the deck. You didn't know if she was going to fucking live or die, and you stopped playing,
no,
rightfully so.
yeah. I mean, that's for two or three reasons. One is because it's the moral thing to do. We're older. We didn't set Tidy Trax up till I was 30. So in that situation, you probably had a club full of young kids that were, let's just say partying hard themselves, and we're in the heat of the moment. Whereas me and Andy, A, we're older than most of the crowd, and B, we've never done drugs. Which I remember telling people at a weekender. We used to do a thing where it was the Tidy Boys Unplanned. And on a Sunday afternoon, we'd sit on a sofa and people would ask us questions. And once it came up about what drugs we prefer, and me and Andy had to tell our audience, we got some shocking news. And they went,
Yeah.
me and Andy have never took a pill or any form of drugs ever in our life. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear a pin drop. It was like, we've been coming to your raves and your parties and you're listening to your music off our face for all these years. You're on stage. Mr. Pickles is like, come on. Looks like you're coked out your head. And you're telling us you've never took drugs. And it's true. I swear on my son's life, never have. Lots of reasons. Mine's a medical reason because at the age of 17, I was diagnosed with a heart murmur. And so growing up, even when I went clubbing, things were being offered, and I always thought, "Oh, do I want to risk my heart collapsing tonight?" And so I've always said no. Pickles is just a mummy's boy, really. So he's never done it. So yeah, the people that invented this mad party, crowd and party, never done it. And so going back to that thing at Garland's, it would have been our responsibility because we've never done drugs. And also the fact that we're older and slightly in a wiser headspace than the crowd at that
Yeah.
time.
It's almost like Cristiano Ronaldo going having a group full of kids and saying, "Actually, I don't really like football, to be honest with you." And you said
Yeah, it is.
before you've heard Tidy being described as a cult. I've heard you being called a cult before today. I think it was a cult anyway. I
Yeah, you probably misheard them.
might
Yeah,
be wrong.
I
Yeah,
mean, to be fair, we have been called quite a lot of things because we are Marmites, Jay. To be honest, a lot of people can't quite get the juxtaposition of two crazy idiots jumping around on stage, taking the piss out of themselves with this serious music. So yeah, I can understand why. Let's just say the musos and the serious people would say, "Oh, they're just fucking clowns jumping around, idiots," and they also think we're money grabbing bastards. But I tell you now, the other thing is another misconception is there isn't a lot of money in hard house. There never really has. Yeah, look, when we were doing weekenders and there was 3,600 people, if you do the math, you think, fucking hell, that's a lot of money. And yes, it did bring in a lot of money, but it used to cost, and it still does, £250,000 to put a weekender on. And trust me, it's a big gamble. Music Factory, who owned Tidy at the time back in the days, but yeah, they might have made 40, 50 grand out of a weekender in its heyday, right? But would you gamble 250 grand to make 40 grand? That's a big gamble. That's a big gamble. And they put their neck on the line, Music Factory, and invested in this. And I remember we did Magna, which is in a steelworks in Sheffield. 4,000, I think 4,500 people came. And I remember the debrief after that. 4,500 people. Let's have a look at what's in the tin. 4 grand we made on that event. Four fucking grand.
I was at that event as well.
And you know, we spunked it on production, and to put that event on, because it was the first ever event in that place, it was a health and safety nightmare. It was, you know, I wanted to spend the money and make the lasers and the production look great, but Music Factory was saying, hold on a minute, we're risking a lot of money, because that cost that was 69 grand to put that Magna on, and it made I think 4.5 grand or something. It's like nobody would gamble that sort of money. Nobody.
It's such a tight margin as well, isn't it?
Well, your profits in your last, you know, if you've got a club of 1,000 people, your profits in your last 200 tickets if you're putting a good production on. And if you don't sell them, I mean, as much as we made money on weekenders, I've lost my house on weekenders. You know, literally, the ideal weekender, the first one, I lost, me personally and my wife, we lost 62 grand on that weekender. 62 grand. And do you know why? Because everybody said they were coming. We spent all the money and they didn't. Well, I put a Facebook page up. Who wants to come to the Ideal Weekender? I had 4,500 people sign up on the Facebook page within an hour. I thought, here we go. Here we bloody go. And only 1,800 people turned up and actually bought tickets. I lost 62 grand on that. And, you know, since then, it's been hard fucking work to try and make a penny out of a weekender. So when people say you're money grabbing bastards, I've sacrificed a lot of my life, a lot of my time, and a hell of a lot of money, and my house. And we all have, the whole team. You know, they think we're running around in Rolls Royces because we've got, you know, a weekender and a time, and making money out of music. That's a different story. That's not what it was. When we were doing 20,000 bits of vinyl, yes. Now when you're doing streaming, you have to wait a year to get 48 quid. Yeah. You know, it's so the fact that Tidy is still here after 29 years, I sometimes think, how the fuck have we got here?
Well, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to brush over this very quickly. But one thing I would like to say, when they say the term adapt and survive, the one thing that's prevalent with you guys is you've overcome everything. You know, when vinyl died, I imagine that was like, well, this is over now. We're not going to make any money, you know, because vinyl sales were good and people actually bought vinyl and you couldn't copy vinyl. And then when digital came around and everyone kind of went, well, yeah, if I buy it, I'll copy it for you. And, you know, but whatever hurdle's been put in your way, you've overcome it. And I think a lot of it is down to, and I know this is specifically you, the marketing side of things. I know, am I right in saying you do all the marketing, the graphics, the videos, you know, keeping yourselves relevant, keeping yourself, you know, because at one point, not just Tidy Trax, but Hard House was on its arse. It was pretty much gone. It does seem to be on a massive resurgence at the moment. And the one thing I will say is, you know, you mentioned Nucleus before. I don't think Nucleus are still going anymore. I don't believe they are.
No.
You know, your Vicious Circle still kind of limping along in the background, and the stuff, the other bits and bobs. Oh yeah, they're still there. Tidy Trax is still here. You are still relevant, and it's testament to hard work and adapting to your surroundings. And you know, I'm a bit of a background guy. Me, I like to. If I watch a film, I'll watch the behind the scenes things as well, and I like to know what's going on. I know. Forget the shop front to Tidy. What you guys, and I know it's predominantly yourself, have done behind the scenes to keep this going and keep the fucking wheels moving and keep the lights on. It's nothing short of phenomenal, mate, because, you know, it's you really have had to adapt and change things around to still be here today and still be relevant. And Press Staten, fucking hell, who'd have put, well, I think we all knew Press Staten was on its ass anyway, like, but when that closed, and it's like, well, that's it now, the Tidy weekend is over. No, he fucking rises up like the Undertaker again. I'm always like, bong, no, fucking, it's not over. He's like fucking Tyson Fury, gets up again. Oh my God. So what was that like, finding out that Press Staten was closed?
Yeah, well, again, thank you very much for the kind words. It has been a battle, and it's like when you look at a swan, they always say it looks graceful on the water, but underneath it's pedaling like mad. And I suppose that's the same for Tidy Trax. We we've had meetings where bad meetings where we think this is the end. What are we going to do? Okay, we haven't got enough money to pay the wages. Oh God, the building's on fire. We're close to coming to the end, and then we have a creative meeting and say, no, fuck it, we're gonna fight our way out of this paper bag, and we do, and we come up with ideas, and it's yeah. Admittedly, I'm the face and probably the heart of Tidy. I've got a great team around me. I always have. But there has been difficult times where it's been me and my wife in the office, and we're at the point of Tidy shutting unless we do something drastic, and we've kept it going. And I think that is due to passion, adapting. Like you said, we've moved with the times. I mean, we were the TikTok generation before TikTok with Tidy TV. We've always done that sort of thing. We've always been forward thinking. We set up Tidy Digital before anything got going. We even had a Facebook before Facebook, which was called Tidy Addict, which was a platform where people could share photos and videos, and nobody caught on. They said, "Oh, it's shit. We don't like it." And then 2 years later, Facebook comes along. They're doing the same stuff. So we've always been ahead of the curve, but we've had to adapt. And like you said, when I think I'm trying to think of the most darkest moments where we've nearly gone. I remember one in Northampton about 7 years ago, and and I said, why don't we do a hard drive where we've got all the catalogue on a hard drive, and you could literally, well, it'd be a lot of money, it's 350 quid, but you get everything on a hard drive. And I remember going to the pub and we put it online. I said to Ange, if we don't sell these hard drives, I think Tidy's over. We went to the pub, we were eating a meal. I looked at my phone. There's 47 grand in the bank account.
Fucking hell.
The hard drive saved us over that. And so it's been loads of moments like that. But when we just moved to these new offices in Wakefield, which we've got other companies, as you know, it's not just Tidy here. Andy runs an education company. We've got a fitness company. I mean, I'll be honest, that's a secret to our survival as well. Not just doing Tidy, but having our fingers in other pies. I'm a graphic designer by trade, so I do lots of graphic design and the videos and stuff. So all of us have got our fingers in other pies. That helps. But when the last November, we were all sitting there doing our stuff, I was editing the video, I think a Hannah Lane video. And that, by the way, being relevant, Hannah Lane, she told us that being at the Tidy Weekender at the last one we done was the greatest moment in her life. And she was brought to, her parents brought her up on Hard House and Tidy. And I've got a video clip, which we haven't posted yet, where she says that was a pinnacle for her. And we booked her really, really cheap because she hadn't had the hit single then. But she's obsessed with Tidy, loves Hard House. And so why Hard House is back is people like Hannah and all these DJs like Patrick Topping who've grown up with Tidy Trax, and it's in their youth. They were partying to Tidy when it was at its peak. So when they're in the studio now, they want to make records that they used to party to, which was Hard House. That's why Hard House is back. But yeah, when the Pontins thing happened, we were sitting there. Sam, you're not going to believe it. I've got an email from Pontins. Oh, what? What's it say? We can't go. They're shutting it from immediate effect. You're joking. We were already about 160 grand into this event. You're joking. Oh, right. Ring the manager up down there. Find out if this is a hoax or something. We rang JV, who works down there. He's worked there for 30 years, this guy. We said, JV, what's happened? We just had an email. What email? You're shutting. We're shutting. Even the staff didn't know that. They told us before they told the staff at Prestatyn that Britannia, who run it, Britannia Hotel, wankers, they hadn't even told the staff. So we let, that was how bad it was. So we had a panic meeting. What the hell are we going to do here? And literally we tried everything. We said, well, let's go to Southport. You can't go to Southport. Why? No, we ain't got any space. We thought that's a bit dodgy. 2 months later, they shut down Southport. Yeah. The writing was on the wall for Pontins. So we looked high and low. Nobody would have a clubbing weekend. We tried. Butlins, the trouble with Butlins was they wanted, oh, can you get 7,000 people? Oh, probably not. Oh, it's 380 grand to hire. Oh, right, okay. So we couldn't go to Butlins because that was too much of a jump. But lucky enough, we found this company called Park Dean. They've got loads of great resorts all over the place. And we went down there in Great Yarmouth. They've got a place called Vauxhall. And we went down there. It's caravans, holiday homes and lodges. It's a bit different accommodation, but clean and
It's a lot
very, very
nicer.
tidy.
It's a lot
Oh,
nicer. Very tidy. Hey, I like the way you did that.
it is. It's 5-star compared with Pontins.
Yeah.
And we went down there and we said, this is perfect. They've got better amenities. So yeah, we couldn't get a date this year, 2024, but it's our 30th birthday next year. And we said it'd be a great time to move and reset the weekenders and celebrate our birthday there. So April the 25th, 2025. We're going to go and reset button, and it's a new weekender. It's a new start. Even though we're celebrating the past, we've called this the future is ours because Hard House is back. The weekenders are resetting, and so from Phoenix from the Flames, almost we are still here. We're like a cockroach. You know, you stamp on us. We're still running. We're still running round. So I'm 60 next year. So it's Tidy's 30th birthday, my 60th. Yeah, it should be a good party.
Tidy's 30th, your 60th, and my 50th. So if you want to book me for an old school set, I'd absolutely love to play. Right, we're gonna finish.
Yeah.
We're gonna finish up. Just a quick question: did anyone ever elude your grasp with the Tidy Weekender? Because I know you had Judge Jules and Eddie Halliwell and Yoji and stuff like that. Was there anyone who you tried to get and could never get for whatever reason?
Well, it's sometimes difficult getting the trance DJs, you know, the Arm and Van Burens and the Ferry Corsons, because unfortunately, Hard House, as you said, it was in the wilderness, and it's been a dirty word for a long time, probably for 10 years previous. Nobody touch it. So my trance DJ playing at your Hard House weekend, no way.
Where Pontins in Prestatyn?
Pontins. and like I said, Hard House a dirty word. Now you got Armin and Ferry banging it out, playing bloody Hard House again. So yeah, what goes around comes around. So apart from maybe the odd big trance DJ, no, we've always kept it real. We've always tried to be true to the scene. It would be odd to bring in Paul Oakenfold. You know, it wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So you've got to bring people in that are going to play to the crowd. It's no good being a bit weird. In fact, some of the best bookings at the Weekenders have been Keith Chegwin, Timmy Mallet. Because at the Weekenders, if people don't know, we've had the Chuckle Brothers,
MC Devo,
MC Devo. We've had Pat Sharp, Roy Walker. We've had them all there, you know, and so we always have a daytime silly guest. So they've always been my most enjoyable bookings. But yeah, I don't think there's anybody we think I wish we'd had, really. Not that regrettable.
Good. Right, I'm going to finish off now with some quick fire questions. Amadeus, Celery Mozart, I will take your first answer and your first answer only. Chinese or pizza?
Chinese.
One thing you would rid from the world?
War.
Full English or a roast dinner?
Roast dinner.
Alive or dead, who would you most like to spend time in a studio with?
I'd like to spend time with Tony De Vit.
Hard style or a hard poo?
Constipation every time.
You've got £1 million to put a lineup on. Alive or dead, who would you put on?
I would love to. It probably wouldn't cost £1 million, but I'd like to put the original trade lineup on. As I've said before, Alan Thompson, Malcolm Duffy, Steve Thomas, then into Tony De Vit, Ian M, Pete Wardman. That lineup in that order.
Do you like the smell of your own farts?
It depends what I've eaten. It really does depend. When it's after a big roast dinner, not a full English, then I don't.
You walk into a stop and it's fully stocked. What's your go-to chocolate bar?
I always go for a Galaxy-based bar, so Ripple or anything made by Galaxy.
What, in your opinion, is the best remix of Heaven's Cry? Sorry, I couldn't get through this interview without mentioning Heaven's Cry. It had to be in there somewhere.
You had to mention it.
You had to.
It's very, I mean, a lot of people don't realise that we've never played the original version out. So I'd have to stand by our decision of playing it for the last 23 years, which would be the Flash Harry remix, because that's Paul Chambers did it, and I asked him to do it. I remember where I was when I asked him to do it, and yeah, we were the first to play it out, and that mix still stands up. Although I do like the new Ryan K remix we put out literally a couple of weeks ago. That's worth checking out, the Ryan K remix.
Fantastic. What scares you?
Being on a beach with a thunderstorm approaching at midnight.
The young ones or spitting image?
Spitting image.
What superpower would you have?
To be able to be transported back to any moment in time I wanted to.
Who would play you in a movie? Don't say Jason Statham. Come on. Be real.
Andy Pickles. Andy Pickles said somebody, I forget who he said. He said Danny DeVito. I said, you bastard. No, I think somebody would play me in a movie. I'm not a big movie goer. I loved John Thor, if he was still alive, to play me from Sweeney.
One of your favourite TV shows? Alive or dead, who would you like to have dinner with?
Steve Jobs.
And what's the best podcast you've ever been on?
You're going to have to give me about an hour to think about it. I'm actually, to be fair, I'm not on many podcasts at all. I'm very selective. So I would say this one.
Well, listen, it brings me on to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much. It really is a pleasure, and it's been fantastic and very, very interesting to hear your stories. I'm sure the listeners will love it as well. Thank you. So, is there anything you want to mention or plug before the end of the podcast?
No, I'd just like to thank. I'd like to thank everybody that supported Tidy over the last 29 years, and I would love everybody that used to love Tidy, that used to go out, to come back out, because it is as good as it was back in the day, and you can enjoy yourself in a different kind of way. You're probably not 22 anymore. You're probably 42. However, the party's still the same. The vibes are still the same, and we're still playing Heaven's Cry.
That's all. And no hardstyle.
No,
right, thank you so much, Amo. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, guys, there's 40+ episodes to look back on. I've got a whole host of guests, from local talents to legends such as today. Get yourself onto YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all that good jazz. Check out one of the other episodes, and please, I know I hate to say this, but if you do enjoy the episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I will see you all in 3 weeks' time. Thank you so much for your support, and thanks once again to Mr. Amadeus Mozart.
Thank you.